But so we're gonna move on to watching your submissive, watching and reading your submissive, and this goes really heavy into knowing your submissive, knowing their limits, knowing their mental, their emotional, and their physical limits. I tried explaining this to Honey the other day in a video that one of our members put out. And in the video, you see that the spankee, this woman is spanking, she bends her knees. And that said something to the person who was spanking, or the dominant, the top at that time. I was like, I couldn't remember the word top for some reason. I don't know why. But so that told the top something that, a breath was needed. And it's the same. If you don't know you're submissive, if Honey had an abuse that she didn't tell me, she didn't, say it was cigarettes, okay? Or no, we'll say it was, better yet, we'll say it was leather, right? So all of Honey's equipment is leather. So because I don't know that, well, I made a mistake and I triggered her trauma every time she puts it on. So again, if you don't know, if you haven't taken the time to get to know your submissive, know their abuses, if you haven't created that space enough to where they can honestly open up, feel safe, and communicate with you their abuses, their triggers, their likes, their dislikes, and everything else about them, then you won't be able to read them. So many submissives, when they've had too much, and they're bent over a table, they'll lean forward, okay? Or they'll move sideways. If you are looking for that, and sometimes that sideways isn't that much. Sometimes it's really only a millimeter. We're talking about impact play right now. Sometimes it's only a millimeter. Sometimes it's an inch. Sometimes it's 5 inches. So it's really noticeable. The big thing to watch is the knees. If the knees move, if she's bending the bottom of her leg, if she or he, if the bottom is bending their legs, if they're rocking their ass, if they're become super quiet, and all of this is when you're watching your submissive, you're watching for those mental and emotional triggers, mental, physical, and emotional triggers. And those triggers can be different for everybody. So I know as Honey's husband and dominant, I know that her physical limit is pretty high, but her emotional and mental limit is not as high. So I have to watch for that. Would you agree with that?
I think so.
You know what I mean? Have you ever seen where I was unable to read you?
No, not at all.
Yeah, so I pretty much know where your body is. And this is where knowing you're submissive, knowing her past, knowing her traumas, knowing how she's feeling that day, and understanding that there's a time where she may be telling you, no, I don't want this, but you can see it in her behavior. You can see she was doing this earlier. You can see it in her behavior. You can see it in the way she carries her shoulders. You can see it in the smirk on her face, or the attitude that she has. And submissives, don't ever be afraid to ask your dominant for impact play, or some type of correction, or a hug, or anything like that. Would you agree with that? Would you say that?
I never gave you an attitude.
That's not what I'm talking about. Would you say that submissives should ever be afraid to?
No,
ask
it probably feels weird to ask for a spanking or to ask for a correction, but sometimes it's exactly that what you need.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even when sometimes they don't know that they need it. And you got to remember that when you hand out the non-play, non-requested, that it's not a punishment. This is not a punishment. It's an emotional, for lack of a better way to explain it, because every submissive is different. It's an emotional support. Because sometimes they don't realize, or submissives will not realize that, hey, I need a spanking. Hey, I need a hug. I need a, smack on my ass, as you walk by. Or whatever that is that emotionally lifts them up and emotionally supports you. Would you agree with that?
Yes, of course. Mostly you can say, okay, I need a hug. That's probably not a
Right.
problem at all.
Right.
But to say I need a spanking or an adjustment, that is hard to say.
Okay. Is there a way a submissive can overcome that?
Communicate about it, but I don't see how right now,
Okay.
because you can I can come to you and say I need something, but I don't know what.
And that's okay too for submissives. If you need something and you don't know, this is where watching and reading your submissive comes in for dominance. Where if you don't know, I should be able to step back. Now that I know you need something, because maybe I'm too busy. Maybe I'm working. Maybe I'm, taking a lot of time on, for myself, and I'm not fully aware. Dominants are human. Sometimes we get distracted. Sometimes we need a break. Would you agree with that? Sometimes, we definitely need a break. So maybe I'm not paying attention. Maybe I'm not looking out for exactly what is what. And so if you come to your dominant and you say, I need something, I'm not sure what it is, but I need something. This is where watching and reading are submissive. Just my experience. I will be able to just step back, watch her, because now I know. And I'm going to give her a kiss on the forehead, and I'm going to send her to, do her task. But while she's doing her task, I'm watching her. I'm watching what she's doing. I'm watching her body language. Is her shoulders up? Is she in pride mode? Does she have a fake smile on her face? Is she having a bad day? If she's having a bad day, why? And sometimes that requires a little bit of extra communication. Sometimes for me and Honey, sometimes all I have to do is kiss her, and I know that she's, not having the best day. And that's where, you have to learn to read that body language. And you can only do that with the honest, trusting, with the pillars. You can only do that with the pillars by having that level of honest communication. One of the biggest mistakes I see most new dominants make repeatedly, and it doesn't matter if you've been doing it a year or 5 years, or even 6. The common mistake I always see is they are not reading their submissive and enforcing punishments and other things at the right time. I recently made this mistake, and I've been kicking myself in the butt for it ever since. But every submission is different. Sometimes we forget. So we forget, that dominants are human and we make mistakes. So if you need something from your dominant, tell them. If you are a dominant and and you're watching your submissive, but yet you're not exactly sure what they're saying, this is where the pillars come in. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The pillars can be a powerful thing. But I'm not going to speak on that. Honey's going to speak on punishments and pillars, here in a minute. So I think another very important topic to touch on is and watching your submissive and reading their body language is the one thing I watch during play during impact play is their ass. I watch their back. I watch their knees, and I watch where they're putting their ass. If their ass is going forward, that had a little bit too hard of a strike. If their ass is coming backward, then that last strike I gave them wasn't exactly forceful enough. Whatnot. And also, there's different ways to apply a strike. So if you're using a flogger, you can roll it in your hand. So you like roll it open, so the leather straps will open, and it's. Would you say it's more stingy, less stingy?
More stingy.
Okay, so it's more stingy, and they get more of a feel from it. And I often use that for us if she is pushing backwards and she's not moving in the direction or the way that I know her body moves when she's enjoying what we're doing. So super important. Learn the body language, and you don't have to be in play. You don't have to be building that BDSM trust to be able to learn to read your submissive. Honey knows when I'm mad. She knows when I'm upset. And anybody that's been playing long enough together, or has been a couple long enough together, can really look out and say, hey, yeah. So I want to, before we move on to Honey, I want to ask if there's any questions from our viewers. I'm not sure if it's just the two of you or if it's anybody else. Nope. Okay, it looks like we lost one. So I think you two are probably watching together. So are there any questions on what we've covered so far? Man, we keep getting that warning. On what we've covered so far. I'm more than happy to go into a deeper explanation of this if that's needed. Okay, I'm assuming no.
Some people are not that fast with typing.
Okay.
I'll give it
So
a second.
I guess I could do that.
Wake up.
And so we'll I really this is kind of our first little thing, so we're just kind of stumbling through it a little bit. I'm not really sure exactly how deep to go down the rabbit hole into bondage, into watching your submissive. Every submissive is different. Just take the time to get to know your submissive. You have to remember that BDSM trust is a completely different thing than trusting your submissive or your dominant to go to the store to get you a pack of cigarettes and bring you the change. It's a whole different thing than BDSM trust is a whole different level of trust than trusting your partner enough not to cheat on you. It's a whole different level of trust, and you have to be able to bring that around, and that's really only built during play. I know that's not really a topic that I put up, but I figured I would cover that just really, really quick before I pass it off on the punishments to Honey. So punishments, Honey. What would you say is the best way to? Okay.
As of right now, we are good to go. Just more of the not to do.
Not to do, so that.
Or how to avoid damage during play, other than the safe word, of course.
Okay, so if you excuse me just 1 second. Hold on, stay here. We should have been prepared for this, but so this is a makeshift paddle that I bought to replace our big paddle that I think everybody's probably seen. So it really depends on where you're grabbing this paddle and how firm the dominant is grabbing it. If he's grabbing it really hard and he's swinging flat, you see how flat that is, how much of a problem that is. That means that anything that's bent, okay, well, whatever, anything that's bent and is now only has a single impact point. That's really the problem. You avoid damage by making sure that you're always rubbing that ass, during impact play. Spread that blood out. You don't want that blood pooling into one location. If you're striking and you're seeing a white mark there, well, then that tool is not the proper tool for you to be using at that point. You should be waiting until you're a little bit more skilled. We have other people in the group that we plan on doing a link-in or a guest appearance with Victoria. Most of you know Victoria. She is well skilled. She's been doing it. I think she's probably been doing it longer than I have. And she's demonstrated her ability for impact play and spanking and other elements of BDSM. So I want to continue to do these, to bring these educational videos, and so that for everybody to answer some questions. So this, if you're seeing a white spot after you strike at all, then you're not striking correctly. It's really about that firm grip. If you're grabbing it too firm, you're not allowing flexibility in that. Think about this. If I'm striking flat like this, I'm only hitting one knuckle. So if I strike like this, now but that's wrong too, because now my impact point's different. Okay. So again, it's all really about that impact point. You watch where you're striking, and relax that hand. Let it kind of roll. You know what I mean? It's still flat, but it's not so flat that when it strikes, you know what I mean? A great place. Yeah, honey doesn't really like the paddle. So that when it strikes, a great way to test it is on your forearm. Boom. If I look and I have a flat square or rectangle of where I struck, then I know that I at least struck that area correctly. If the impact is not spread out over an area, then you're doing it wrong. And the reason why I say that is because you'll see white. And you should not ever see a white spot ever when you're doing impact. Because what that says is that you remove the blood from that area. You want a bright red. You want that bright, beautiful Coca-Cola red. You really do. And make sure that if you, after a couple of strikes, you rub that ass out. You spread from the center. This is the center of the ass. Spread down, spread to the side, spread up. Okay? And you're spreading that blood out. You're spreading it out. You know what I mean? And what this will also do is it'll alleviate the impact area, and it will also help you lessen the result. How would you explain that when I rub you?
It has, for me, it has more than more reasons. Yeah, spread the blood out, and it actually calms you. I don't know how to explain it. It calms you a little bit. Depending on the toy you use, it takes away the sting, or it makes it. I would say
better.
Just round.
Okay, yeah, it just makes it better. It's also about impact. That impact, that physical touch, and giving her that ability to breathe. Avoiding the damage, and this is how you do it. You for the dominant, if you're seeing, when you lift that strike, if you're seeing a white spot, it'll be a circle or it can be a square or whatever. You'll see it immediately. It'll be there for a good, I would say maybe 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. If you're seeing that, then you're causing damage. It's also communication. The dues for impact or just, I think we're referring to bondage. Would you say that that's what you're referring to, Sydney? The question was from Sydney.
Yeah, I think they just look together.
Yeah. I think you're referring to bondage or impact. So during the course of how the not to do's. So the not to do's are not to communicate. You always communicate. If your dominant is striking you and you feel a sharp, how would you describe that? Because my mistress didn't use that. She was more in the floggers. But when you feel a sharp stabbing pain in one area, that'd be about right. Then you know, if you're not communicating that, or if your dominant doesn't know how to read that, then you're not communicating that damage. Okay? So hopefully your dominant is now watching with flat surfaces. Okay? Anything that, like a flogger, okay? A flogger is basically a stingy paddle. Depending on how wide these are, how wide your leather strips are, margins of impact. So the statement from Sydney is, so far we haven't had any damage beyond minor bruising, but he just wants to make sure if there's any way if there are ways to tell. The minor bruising is expected. If you're not leaving minor marks, you're probably not doing it right. But no, is there a way to avoid damage, permanent damage? Yes, and that's, again, don't strike, round surfaces or flat surfaces on round. Make sure you're trying to, for this paddle, when I strike Honey, I try to strike the bottom of her butt. I avoid the top section, and I try to kind of swipe up, because this way here, the impact is spread through the bottom of her butt, through the rest of it. It minimizes the impact, and my hand is loose. It's loose. You know what I mean? Right. And that's actually his job, is to not cause permanent damage. When it comes to bondage and impact, take your time, go slow until you absolutely know, absolutely know what is transpiring and what's not. The best way I've found to avoid damage is just watch your submissive. They will tell you if that pain is too much. And, also your submissive should be telling you if it's not enough. Make sure you're not striking, flat surfaces on round surfaces. Make sure that, that you're getting flat on flat or flat on semi-curved, just make sure that impact is spread out over the area, over the surface, okay? And that is, and for me personally, I never swing a paddle through. It's not baseball, really. You never swing a paddle through. Now, a flogger, on the other hand, you can swing through. If you twist, this isn't the best flogger. It was something we bought just to see if Honey liked floggers. If you twist this, it'll open it, okay, and that makes it more stingy. If you close it, right, it makes it a little bit more thuddy. Would you agree? Okay, it makes it more thuddy. So there's different ways to use it. As far as damage goes, honestly, I would avoid hard paddles like this, unless the submissive is a super, masochist, um, super into high levels of pain, and even then, you really only, you want to make sure you're not striking a flat surface on a round, because you're going to get that single point of contact. You want to make sure that that surface is spread out, that impact is spread out over the surface, and that's the best way to avoid damage. Not leaving bruises, not leaving minor bruises. Well, you probably want to leave minor bruises.
Submissive will be disappointed if she doesn't have one.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not talking about long-term bruises. I'm just talking about something that's there for a day. I mean, yeah. So with a flogger, floggers are great because they are a paddle, but they're flexible. So there's a few ways to use a flogger in impact play. So a flogger you can tip, which is exactly what it sounds like, the tip, and it you swing it in such a fashion that the edges of the tips basically rake the ass when you swing it. This way, crossover, whatever. But make sure that you have a firm grip on it, because if you do a tip and you do it incorrectly, the chances for damage are pretty high, because it's basically you're scratching the skin, and if you don't have a firm grip, you can actually cut the skin open. So before you get into tipping, make sure that you know what you're doing. A really good way to practice, if your submissive is okay with it, is have her sit on your lap, okay, and then strike the inside of her thigh. Just as simple, okay, and this is for more of a sting. And the reason why I suggest that is because she's sitting over your crotch, you're probably going to be a little bit more cautious about swinging that one. Okay? So it's a great way to practice for the flogger. It's a great way to practice with impact, and practicing the control of the flogger itself and knowing where to go, and how to control its direction, how to control what it's doing, the way it's doing. The hardest part is controlling all the falls. So for those that are watching later or don't know, this is a fall. So here there are 45 falls, okay? And your fall width will determine how fuddy it is. It'll also determine the weight of it. So you want to make sure that you're using the right one. This is a toy that will cost money. We're going to look at getting a more extensive one. If anybody out there knows, watching now or watching later, knows maybe that makes a decent flogger, let us know. Because we had a problem with this one. There was bits of leather and other material that came off, and I had to wash it. And it was kind of a mess.
And it stinks.
Yeah, and it stinks. Yeah, she doesn't like the smell of it. But floggers are great for beginners. Floggers are perfect. They'll provide the sting. If you're into thuddy, there are ways that you can swing a flogger. That with just a little bit of practice, you can learn to swing a flogger correctly. I believe Victoria has a tutorial. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. I believe Victoria has a video on floggers.
Not sure.
And the correct way to use them. But eventually, in one of the next ones that we do, we may end up doing it and having Victoria come in and speak on it, specifically impact play with toys. She's been You know,
She's awesome.
yeah, she's been a spanker for a long time. You know, like I said, I think she's probably been doing it longer than I have. So it's good that that you're dominant, Sydney. That you're dominant is taking the care. That's and that he's caring enough about your well-being to not cause permanent damage. No dominant should ever be looking to cause permanent damage. If he is, that submission should run. Would you agree with that? Yeah, yeah. No submissive should be subjected to that. The best way I found to just avoid damage altogether, watch and read your submissive. Pay attention. Her or his body, will tell you how they're receiving that. So before we go on, you guys have any questions? Any other questions?
I want to add to this, and not every day is the same day. You might take a paddle today, but the next day you cannot even take a feather. So just watch and communicate. Communicate is I think it's the most important thing on it. On both ends, the submissive has to communicate if it's getting too much. A submissive shouldn't be afraid to communicate with her dominant if it's getting too much. Even if you're a heavy masochist, tell your dominant, hey, today I cannot take anymore. That's not weak.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
And it's not using a safe word either. Look, there's no shame in using a safe word. But your safe word should, in my experience, should not be your go-to. Your go-to should be, for a submissive, should be, in my time, serving as a submissive, was me looking at my mistress saying, hey, look, as you said, I'm done. I'm not the safe word, but I'm just done for today.
Right.
For whatever reason, I just don't feel like playing today. And that should always be okay. Your dominant should not ever look at you and say, too bad.